The
We
alien
can't
queen
stay
was
here.
already raising
know,
her blade
but we
when
have
the
this
battlefield
moment.
went silent.
We can't
Not because
stay
of fear,
here.
I know,
not because of
but
orders,
we have this moment.
but because Empress Valora of the Sarix Dominion saw something that shouldn't exist. A human soldier kneeling in blood-soaked sand, holding her wounded daughter, like the universe depended on it. The Nevada desert burned under a shattered sky. Twin suns, no, that wasn't right. One sun, Earth's sun, filtered through smoke so thick it looked doubled. Alien warships lay broken across the dunes, their black metal torn open like dead beasts. Human armor scattered everywhere, melted, cracked, abandoned. The war had done what it always did. It erased names. It erased futures. Valora stood at the edge of a massive crater, her tall figure framed by drifting ash. Her skin shimmered silver blue, hard as crystal, her crown fused directly into her armored skull crest. In her hand, she held a plasma glaive, humming softly, eager for one last execution. This world was supposed to be clean by nightfall. Humans were supposed to be gone. Her soldiers had done their job well, too well. Then she saw him. A human soldier knelt alone in the center of the crater. His helmet lay shattered beside him. His armor was scorched black, barely holding together. Blood ran down his arm, but he didn't look at his own wounds. He was looking at the child in his arms. Small, fragile, silver blue skin marked with royal patterns that glowed faintly even through the blood. Princess Kyra, her daughter, the last heir of the Sarix bloodline. Valora's heart, if the Sarix had hearts in the way humans understood them, froze. Kyra's chest rose unevenly, struggling for each breath. A deep plasma wound cut across her side, glowing faintly, refusing to close. Her bioluminescent blood soaked into the human's uniform, staining it a dark violet that looked almost black in the smoke-filtered light. The human pressed his shaking hands against the wound, whispering something over and over. Not prayers, not threats, just words, desperate and broken. Stay with me, please. Just stay. Sarix soldiers raised their weapons instantly. The few human fighters still alive nearby froze in terror, expecting death. But Valora did not give the order. She could not move. This was impossible. Humans were enemies. Humans were reckless killers who'd been fighting the Sarix Dominion for 2 brutal years. Humans destroyed worlds and called it liberation. That was what the Dominion taught. That was what 2 centuries of doctrine had proven. Yet here was one of them, holding her daughter as if she were his own child. Using his own medical supplies, precious, irreplaceable combat medicine, to keep an enemy alive. Valora stepped forward slowly. Each step felt heavy, like walking through water. Her glaive remained raised, but her grip weakened. The human finally looked up. His eyes widened, not in anger, not in defiance, but in fear. Not fear for himself, fear for Kyra. "Don't come closer," he said, his voice rough and broken. "She's unstable. If she moves too much, she won't make it." Valora's guards hissed in outrage. "How dare you command your empress," one shouted, weapon trained on the human skull. But Valora lifted her hand. Silence returned, broken only by the wind howling across the blasted sand. She stared at the human, studied him. 40-something years old by human standards, she estimated. Dark hair graying at the temples, face lined with exhaustion and something deeper. The kind of weariness that came from seeing too many people die. "Why is she alive?" Valora asked, her voice cold but unsteady. The human swallowed. Valora could see his throat work, see the calculation behind his eyes. He knew this was a test, knew one wrong word could end him. "Because she saved someone," he said finally. Valora's breath caught. Saved who? The human looked down at Kyra, his hands tightened slightly around her, careful not to cause pain. A child, a human child. She pushed him out of the blast radius, took it herself. The desert wind howled between them, carrying ash and the smell of burning metal. Valora remembered the reports. A civilian evacuation zone destroyed by orbital fire. No survivors expected. Kyra had been deployed there against Valora's direct wishes. Training mission, they'd said. Controlled battlefield, they'd promised. Nothing about this was controlled. Kyra's eyelids fluttered, weak, fading. "Mother," she whispered, the word barely audible. Valora rushed forward without thinking. Her guards panicked. "Your Majesty!" But the Empress was already kneeling beside them, her regal armor sinking into the sand. She reached out toward her daughter, then hesitated. The human still held Kyra, and something in Valora's tactical mind screamed, this was a trap. This was manipulation. The human didn't pull away, didn't make demands. He just carefully, slowly adjusted his hold so Valora could see the wound clearly. It was bad, worse than bad. Plasma burns didn't heal like conventional weapons. They spread, consuming tissue, turning living cells into superheated ash from the inside out. She needs a regeneration chamber, Valora said, her voice cracking, despite 2 centuries of practice at command. Now, the human shook his head slowly. She won't survive transport. I've seen this kind of wound before. Alien tech burns deeper than it looks. The movement alone would... He stopped, seemed to gather himself. She won't make it. Valora's eyes snapped to him, fury and desperation warring in her expression. Then why is she still breathing? The human hesitated. Then moving very slowly, he reached behind him with one hand. Every weapon in the area locked onto his spine. He pulled out a small metal injector, scratched and dented. Human emergency stabilizer, Valora's tactical knowledge supplied. Crude technology, primitive compared to Sarek's medical science. It doesn't heal, the human said quietly. It buys time, tricks the body into not giving up. He met Valora's eyes. I used mine on her. It's the only reason she's still alive. Valora stared at the device. Human medicine was laughable by Sarek's standards. Chemical compounds that work sometimes, failed others with side effects that could be worse than the injury. And yet her daughter's fingers tightened weakly around the human sleeve. And yet Kyra's breathing while labored was steady. And yet this primitive, inferior medicine had done what it was never designed to do. Keep a Sarek's royal alive long enough for help to arrive. Please, Kyra whispered, her voice barely a breath. Don't kill him. The words hit Valora harder than any weapon ever had. Her daughter had never begged, not once in 20 years. Kyra had been raised as a warrior, trained since childhood to show no weakness, to never plead with enemies. And now she was using what might be her last words to beg for a human's life. Valora closed her eyes. Centuries of doctrine screamed at her. Humans were dangerous. Mercy was weakness. Compassion led to extinction. A trust was how you died. She'd learned that lesson when the Krill assassinated her husband during peace negotiations 220 years ago. She opened her eyes again and looked at this human, this soldier who could have let her daughter die. Who could have extracted intelligence from a dying royal? Who could have secured a propaganda victory that might have turned the entire war? Instead, he'd wasted his own medicine and stayed to whisper, "Please don't die," like it was a prayer. Valora made her decision. Do it, she said. The human didn't waste a second. He repositioned the injector. Clearly, he'd already given Kyra 1 dose and was preparing a second, dangerous but necessary. The device hissed, releasing a glowing fluid that pulsed softly under Kyra's silver-blue skin. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Kyra gasped. Her breathing steadied. The glow in her veins strengthened, bioluminescence returning to something closer to normal. The battlefield remained silent. Sarek's and human soldiers alike watched this impossible moment. An empress kneeling beside her enemy, both of them trying to save the same life. Valora looked at the human again. Really looked at him. Not as a target, not as a threat, as a person who'd made a choice that defied every expectation of war. Your name? She asked. Colonel Garrett Dalton, ma'am, he said quietly. Force Recon, Combat Medic. A simple name. Direct, honest, no artifice. You saved my daughter, Valora said. Garrett shook his head slightly. No, ma'am, she saved us first. I'm just returning the favor. Valora studied him carefully now, not as an enemy, not as prey, as something far more dangerous, a variable she couldn't predict. A human who chose mercy when war demanded cruelty. Around them, soldiers on both sides lowered their weapons, uncertain. Orders had been clear. Eliminate all resistance. But no one had given orders for this. No one had planned for the moment when the Empress of the Sarek's dominion knelt in the sand beside a human soldier, both of them choosing the same impossible thing, life over doctrine. Valora realized with sudden terrible clarity that the most terrifying weapon humanity possessed wasn't their nuclear arsenal or their orbital defense grid. It was their refusal to stop being human, even when the universe tried to beat it out of them. General Korvax, Valora said, not looking away from Garrett. An older Sarix warrior stepped forward, his armor marked with decades of service. Your Majesty, prepare medical transport, priority alpha, and... She paused. Take the human as well. Your Majesty? Korvax's surprise was evident even through his helmet. Colonel Dalton is now a prisoner of honor. He will accompany Princess Kyra to the orbital station. He will not be harmed. Is this understood? Yes, Your Majesty. Garrett started to speak, then stopped. What could he say? He was a prisoner now, but a live prisoner, which was more than he'd expected when he'd knelt in this crater. Valora leaned close to her daughter. Hold on, Kyra. Just hold on. Kyra's eyes opened slightly. She looked at her mother, then at Garrett, then back. Thank you, she whispered, to both of them. The transport arrived within minutes, a sleek Sarix medical ship that materialized from the smoke like a ghost. Medics rushed out, professional and efficient. They hesitated when they saw Garrett holding Kyra, but Valora's sharp command got them moving. The human stays with her until we're aboard. If she destabilizes, he knows the dosage. It was a lie. Valora knew it, the medics knew it, but it gave Garrett a reason to stay close, to see Kyra safely loaded, to know she'd made it this far. As they lifted Kyra onto the medical gurney, her hand slipped from Garrett's sleeve. For a moment, he thought she'd lost consciousness again. Then her fingers moved slightly, a small gesture, but deliberate. Thank you, it said without words. Garrett nodded once. Then Sarix guards were surrounding him, not hostile but firm, and he was being escorted onto the transport as a prisoner. The last thing he saw before the ship lifted off was the Nevada desert falling away beneath them. Somewhere down there was his unit. Somewhere down there was the war he'd been fighting for 2 years. Somewhere down there was the person he'd been before he'd made a choice that changed everything. The ship climbed toward orbit, carrying an empress, her dying daughter, and the enemy soldier who'd saved her life. And below them, word was already spreading, human and Sarix alike, sending messages through encrypted channels and open broadcasts. The Empress's daughter had saved a human child. A human soldier had saved the Sarix heir. Everything just changed. The silence didn't last. It never does after mercy. Valora stood in the medical bay of her orbital command station, watching through reinforced glass as Sarix physicians worked on Kyra. The regeneration chamber hummed with power, its interior filled with the blue-white light of cellular reconstruction technology that had been perfected over millennia. But Kyra wasn't healing normally. Explain, Valora demanded. The chief physician, an elderly Sarix named Theron, manipulated a holographic display showing Kyra's cellular structure. The human stabilizer, Your Majesty, it's interfering isn't the right word. Interacting. The chemical compounds are designed for human biology. Carbon-based, inefficient, prone to side effects. But somehow they've bonded with the princess's plasma wound. Is she dying? No. Theron sounded puzzled. The opposite, actually. The human medicine is slowing her natural regeneration, but it's also preventing the plasma burn from spreading. It's creating a buffer zone around the wound, buying time for her own healing to catch up. Valora stared at her daughter's unconscious form. How long? 24 hours, maybe less. The princess is strong, Your Majesty, and the human gave her more than one dose, risky, potentially fatal with human physiology. But for a Sarix, it provided exactly the extra margin we needed. Valora nodded slowly. Around her, the command station continued its normal operations, but she could feel the tension. Word had spread quickly. The Empress had spared a human prisoner, had brought him aboard the most secure military installation in the sector, had chosen her daughter over 2 centuries of doctrine. Where is he? Valora asked. The human, detention level 3, General Korvax is personally supervising. I want to see him. Theron hesitated. Your Majesty, the High Council has already sent 7 priority communiques. They're demanding an explanation. High Executive Vorn is calling for emergency session. Let him call. Valora turned from the window. I'll speak to the council when my daughter wakes, not before. She left the medical bay, 2 guards falling into step behind her. The corridors of the station were pristine, all smooth metal and bioluminescent lighting. Sarix engineering at its finest. Efficient, beautiful, perfect. Perfect like a tomb, Valora thought, then pushed the idea away. Detention Level 3 was designed for high-value prisoners, comfortable enough not to be tortured, secure enough that escape was impossible. The guards at the entrance saluted as Valora approached. "Open it," she commanded. The door whispered aside. Garrett Dalton stood by the viewport, looking out at Earth below. He'd been cleaned up. Someone had given him fresh clothing, simple gray that marked him as a prisoner but wasn't degrading. When he turned, Valora saw he'd also been given medical attention. The burns on his arm were bandaged, and the exhaustion in his face had eased slightly. He didn't salute, didn't bow, just met her eyes with something that might have been respect, but definitely wasn't fear. "Your Majesty," he said quietly. "Colonel Dalton." Valora dismissed her guards with a gesture. They hesitated. Protocol said never leave the Empress alone with a prisoner, but they obeyed. The door closed. Silence filled the cell. Outside the viewport, Earth rotated slowly, blue and white and heartbreakingly beautiful. "She's stable," Valora said finally. "Thanks to you." Garrett nodded but didn't speak. "Why?" The question came out harder than Valora intended. "Why did you save her? You had every tactical reason to let her die. Intelligence value alone." "She was dying," Garrett interrupted. Then softer. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty, but she was dying, and I'm a medic. That's what I do. I don't let people die if I can prevent it." "She's not people. She's the enemy." "No, ma'am. With respect, she's someone's daughter, and she was bleeding out in front of me." Garrett turned back to the viewport. "I've let 42 people die in my career. 42 soldiers I couldn't save, couldn't stabilize, couldn't get to in time. I know the math. I know the numbers. But I'm tired of adding to them." Valora was quiet for a long moment. 42, she repeated. "You remember all of them. Every single one, their names, their faces, their last words if they had any." Garrett's reflection in the viewport looked older than the man himself. "So when I saw your daughter dying, I didn't see an enemy combatant. I saw number 43 about to happen, and I couldn't," his voice caught, "I couldn't just let it happen. Even though it might cost you your life?" "Yes, ma'am." Valora studied him. 2 years of war, 2 years of propaganda showing humans as monsters, as aggressors, as a species that would burn the galaxy if it served their interests. And here was one of them, unable to let an enemy die because he'd lost count of his own dead. "Tell me about the child," Valora said. "The human child Kyra saved." Garrett's expression softened slightly. "Brennan Cole, 8 years old, lives in Phoenix with his mother. Wants to be a pilot when he grows up." He paused. "Your daughter didn't hesitate. The orbital strike was coming in. I saw the targeting laser from my position. She was supposed to be observing, right? Learning tactical assessment or something. But she saw Brennan running, saw he wouldn't make it, and she just moved. Violated orders. Saved a life." Garrett met Valora's eyes. She pushed him clear, took the plasma burst herself. "By the time I got there, Brennan was unconscious, but alive. Your daughter was..." He stopped. "I thought she was dead." Then she opened her eyes and asked if the boy was okay. That was her first question. Not "help me," not "I'm dying," just "is he alive?" Valora felt something crack inside her carefully maintained armor. That was Kyra. That was her daughter, raised to be a warrior but never losing the compassion that her father had. The thought came unbidden. King Terran had been like that, always seeing people instead of assets, individuals instead of resources. It had gotten him killed. Valora had spent 220 years making sure Kyra wouldn't make the same mistake. And yet, here they were. "My husband died because he showed mercy to the wrong people," Valora said quietly. "The Krill promised peace. He believed them. They murdered him during the negotiation." Garrett nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It taught me an important lesson. Trust kills. Compassion is weakness. Mercy is the path to extinction." She turned to face him fully. "I raised Kyra to be stronger than that, to never make her father's mistake. With respect, Your Majesty, I don't think saving a child's life is a mistake." "No," Valora's voice sharpened. "Then why is my daughter dying? Why is my empire questioning my judgment? Why are you a prisoner instead of dead? Because she chose to be human. The words hung in the air like a blade. She's not human, Valora said coldly. No, ma'am, but she chose to act like one. She saw someone in danger and chose to save them, even though it violated every tactical and political consideration. She chose compassion over doctrine. Garrett's voice was steady, and I chose the same thing. Maybe that makes us both fools, but I'd rather be a fool who tried to save someone than a perfect soldier who let them die. Valora wanted to argue, wanted to explain how that kind of thinking led to extinction, how mercy was a luxury species couldn't afford, but she couldn't, because Kyra was alive, because this human had wasted his medicine on an enemy, because somewhere in the Nevada desert, an 8-year-old boy named Brennan Cole was going home to his mother instead of dying in the sand. The High Council will demand your execution, Valora said finally. They'll call you a security risk. They'll say I'm compromised by sentiment. Probably right on all counts, ma'am. And yet you don't seem afraid. Garrett smiled, tired and sad. I'm afraid, terrified actually. But I knew the risks when I used my last stabilizer on your daughter. I made my choice. Now you have to make yours. Before Valora could respond, an alarm pulsed through the station. Not combat alert, but priority communication. The Empress's private channel. She activated a riskcom. Speak, General Korvax's voice. Your Majesty, the High Council has convened emergency session. They're demanding your immediate presence. Vorn is... He paused. Vorn is calling for formal charges. Treason and dereliction. Against me, Valora thought. Number against Kyra. I'll be there in 10 minutes, she said. Your Majesty, Princess Kyra is waking. Valora's breath caught. I'm on my way. She ended the comm and turned to Garrett. My daughter is waking. You'll want to be there. I'm a prisoner, ma'am. Yes, a prisoner of honor, which means you have certain privileges. Valora moved to the door, then paused. Colonel Dalton, what you did in that desert was either the bravest thing I've ever witnessed or the most catastrophic mistake in 200 years. I don't yet know which. But I won't let my daughter wake up thinking the man who saved her is rotting in a cell. The door opened. Guards snapped to attention. Escort Colonel Dalton to medical bay observation, Valora commanded. He's permitted to see Princess Kyra when she wakes, but he doesn't leave Sarek's custody. Clear? Yes, Your Majesty. As they walked through the corridors, Valora felt the weight of every decision she'd made in the last 6 hours. The war was still happening. Humans and Sareks were still dying across a dozen worlds, and she'd just brought an enemy prisoner to her most secure facility because her daughter had begged her not to kill him. The High Council was right to question her judgment. She just hoped Kyra would prove them wrong. The medical bay's observation room was small but comfortable, designed for family members to wait while loved ones underwent treatment. Garrett stood at the reinforced window, watching as Sarek's physicians checked Kyra's vital signs. She looked so young, 20 years old by Sarek standards, which Garrett's briefing said was equivalent to late teens in human development. Too young for war, too young to be making choices between doctrine and conscience. But then Garrett had seen 18-year-old human soldiers make the same impossible choices. Age didn't matter when someone was dying in front of you. She's waking, one of the physicians said. Kyra's eyes opened slowly, blinking against the soft light. For a moment, she looked confused. Where am I? What happened? The universal disorientation of waking in a medical facility. Then her gaze found the observation window, found Garrett. She smiled, weak, exhausted, but genuine. Garrett felt something in his chest loosen. She was going to make it. The door to the observation room opened. Valora entered alone, her regal bearing slightly softened by relief. She's asking for you, Valora said to Garrett. Ma'am? My daughter, she wants to speak with you. Valora's expression was unreadable. Normally I would refuse. Security protocols, prisoner restrictions, common sense. But I've already violated most of those today. She led him into the medical bay proper. The physicians stepped back respectfully as the Empress approached, but Garrett could see their confusion. A human, in the Empress's personal medical facility, standing beside the heir to the Sarek's throne. This was unprecedented. Kyra, Valora said gently, taking her daughter's hand. Mother. Kyra's voice was weak but clear. Then her eyes shifted to Garrett. You stayed. Someone had to make sure you didn't die on a technicality, Garrett said, trying for lightness and almost succeeding. Kyra's smile strengthened slightly. They're going to execute you. Mother can't ignore the council forever. I know. Then why? Kyra stopped, gathering strength. Why did you save me? Garrett was quiet for a moment. In the background, he could hear the soft hum of medical equipment, the quiet conversations of physicians pretending not to listen. 5 years ago, he said finally, I was in the Arcturus campaign. We were pinned down, supplies running low, intel saying reinforcements wouldn't make it in time. I had 42 soldiers under my command. We were facing a choice. Hold position and die, or retreat and abandon civilians to enemy forces. He paused. We held. Reinforcements came, but not before I lost half my unit. 42 people died because I chose to save civilians over my own soldiers. Kyra listened, her eyes never leaving his face. I've questioned that choice every day since, Garrett continued. Wondered if I made the right call, if those 42 deaths were worth the 300 civilians we saved. The math works out, right? 42 for 300. Good trade. But it doesn't feel like a good trade, Kyra said quietly. No, it feels like I murdered 42 people through incompetence. Garrett met her eyes. So when I saw you dying in that desert, I didn't see an enemy. I didn't see a strategic opportunity. I saw someone who'd made the same choice I did. Someone who chose to save a life even when doctrine said let them die. He smiled sadly. I couldn't let you become number 43. Not when you'd done exactly what I would have done. Kyra was silent for a long moment. Then, Brennan, the boy I saved, is he? Alive, Garrett confirmed. Probably home with his mother by now. Probably having nightmares. Definitely going to need therapy. But alive. Kyra closed her eyes. A single tear traced down her silver-blue cheek, catching the light like liquid crystal. Thank you, she whispered. Valora watched this exchange with an expression Garrett couldn't quite read. Then she spoke. Kyra, the High Council has convened. They're demanding answers. High Executive Vorn is calling your actions treason. Kyra's eyes opened. Treason? You violated direct orders, endangered yourself for an enemy combatant, compromised your position. Valora's voice was gentle but firm. By Sarek's military law, those are executable offenses. Then execute me. Kyra's voice strengthened. But don't harm Colonel Dalton. He was trying to save a life. That's not a crime. The council disagrees. They say he's a security risk, that allowing him to live, to see our medical technology, to gain intelligence on our command structure, is worth it, Kyra interrupted. Mother, please, I'm begging you, don't let them kill him for showing mercy. Valora looked at her daughter, then at Garrett, then back to Kyra. I've made my decision, the Empress said quietly. You both will face the council. Together. We'll let them make their accusations in full view, and then we'll answer. Your Majesty, one of the physicians started. The princess is stable enough for transport, Valora cut him off. Prepare a mobile regeneration unit. We go before the council in 1 hour. The medical bay erupted into controlled chaos as staff rushed to comply. Garrett stood aside, trying to stay out of the way, trying to process what was happening. He was about to face the Sarek's High Council, the leadership of an alien empire that had been at war with humanity for 2 years. And he was going to do it standing beside the princess he'd saved, defending a choice that made no tactical sense. Kyra caught his eye. Despite her exhaustion, despite the medical equipment still monitoring her vital signs, she looked determined. Whatever happens, she said quietly, thank you for not letting me die alone. Garrett nodded. Thank you for not letting Brennan die at all. Valora heard the exchange and felt something she hadn't experienced in 220 years, uncertainty about her own doctrine. Because these two, her daughter and this human soldier, had found common ground in the worst possible place. In a choice that violated every rule of war, every principle of tactics, every lesson Valora had spent 2 centuries teaching. And somehow, impossibly, they'd both survived it. The question was whether the High Council would let them continue surviving, or whether mercy would finally prove to be exactly the fatal weakness Valora had always believed it was. The council chamber materialized in holographic glory above the station's central command deck. 43 seats arranged in concentric circles, each representing a major Sarix world or military command. The technology was ancient, perfected over millennia, allowing council members to appear physically present despite being scattered across the empire. High Executive Vorn occupied the seat of judgment, his position both literal and symbolic. He was old even by Sarix standards, his silver-blue skin marked with the scars of 100 campaigns. His eyes, when they fixed on Valora, held absolute certainty. Empress Valora. His voice resonated through the chamber, amplified by harmonic technology. You have been summoned to explain actions that violate the doctrine of eternal vigilance, actions that endanger the Sarix dominion and compromise our security. Valora stood in the center of the chamber, Kyra beside her in a mobile regeneration unit that allowed her to be present but continued her treatment. General Korvac stood at attention behind them, and most controversially, Colonel Garrett Dalton stood under guard to Valora's left, a human, in the High Council chambers, witnessing the inner workings of Sarix governance. Vorn's accusation was clear before he even spoke it. You bring an enemy combatant before this council, Vorn said, his voice dripping with controlled fury. You expose our most secure facility to human intelligence gathering. You risk everything our ancestors built for 2 centuries of perfect doctrine. I bring the man who saved my daughter's life, Valora replied calmly, the man whose mercy allowed the Sarix heir to survive. Mercy, Vorn spoke the word like a curse, the very weakness that killed King Terran, the fatal flaw you swore to eliminate from our empire. Murmurs rippled through the council. Valora could see the division already forming, those who agreed with Vorn's certainty, those who hesitated, those who waited to see which way power would flow. I swore to protect the Sarix dominion, Valora said, and part of that protection is ensuring the survival of the royal line. Colonel Dalton ensured that survival. Should I execute him for succeeding where our own forces failed? Our forces didn't fail. Vorn's control slipped slightly. Princess Kyra violated orders. She was instructed to observe, to learn tactical assessment, not to interfere with enemy civilians. Her injury is the direct result of her disobedience. All eyes turned to Kyra. She met Vorn's gaze without flinching, despite the pain evident in her posture. I violated orders because those orders would have resulted in the death of an 8-year-old child. A human child, Vorn corrected, an enemy. What is one human child against the security of the Sarix Empire? What is the Sarix Empire worth, Kyra replied quietly, if our honor means letting children die when we can save them? The council chamber erupted, shouting, accusations, defenders and detractors all speaking over each other in a chaos that threatened to dissolve 2,000 years of protocol. Valora activated the Empress Override, a harmonic frequency that silenced every voice simultaneously. The sudden quiet was almost painful. Hear me, Valora commanded, her voice carrying absolute authority. This is not a debate about one child. This is a question about what the Sarix dominion has become. She gestured to Kyra. My daughter saw a child about to die. She chose to save him. That choice nearly killed her. Colonel Dalton, she indicated Garrett, saw my daughter dying. He chose to save her. That choice made him a prisoner. 2 people, Valora continued, from opposing civilizations, both choosing mercy when war demanded cruelty, both surviving when doctrine said they should have failed. And now you want to execute them for proving that compassion isn't weakness. Compassion is exactly weakness. Vorn stood, his form towering in the holographic space. 220 years ago, Empress, you learned this lesson when the Krill murdered King Terran during peace negotiations. You built our doctrine on that truth. Trust leads to death. Mercy invites extinction. He turned to address the full council. And now, because one human showed tactical patience, used our own emotions against us, the Empress questions everything we've built. This is how empires fall, not through military defeat, but through erosion of principle. Valora felt the chamber's mood shifting. Vorn was right in a sense. Every argument he made was logical, defensible, based on hard-won experience. But he was also wrong in the way that mattered most. General Korvac, Valora said, tell the council what you found in the Nevada desert. The old warrior stepped forward. Your Majesty, when we secured the area, we recovered battlefield recordings from both Sarix and human sources. I've compiled them into a single timeline. A holographic display materialized showing the events leading to Kyra's injury. The council watched in silence as the recording played. Kyra on observation duty, monitoring the civilian evacuation zone, the targeting laser locking on, the orbital strike incoming. And then, Brennan Cole running through the streets, 8 years old, separated from his evacuation group, visible for 3 seconds before the plasma strike would turn him to ash. Kyra's decision took less than 1 second. No hesitation, no calculation. She simply moved, pushing the boy clear, taking the blast herself. The recording showed Brennan landing hard but alive. Showed Kyra crumpling, her armor shattered, blood spreading across the sand. Then it showed something else. Garrett Dalton, running through the aftermath, finding Kyra. His tactical visor showed his HUD, threat assessment, intelligence value, evacuation protocols. Every system telling him to secure intel and move, and his hands reaching for his medical kit instead. Using his last combat stabilizer on an enemy, staying when he should have run. The recording ended. The council chamber was silent. "This is the evidence," Korvac said quietly. "Princess Kyra chose to save a life at cost to her own. Colonel Dalton chose the same. Neither acted out of tactics or strategy. They acted because they saw someone dying and refused to accept it." Vorn recovered first. Emotional responses, exactly what makes them dangerous. The Sarek's dominion cannot afford to be led by sentiment. "And what should lead us?" Kyra spoke up, her voice gaining strength. "Cold calculation? Perfect optimization? The certainty that we're right and everyone else is expendable?" She looked around the council chamber. "High Executor Vorn claims my father died because of mercy, but that's not the whole truth. My father died because the Krill betrayed him. The fault was theirs, not his. But for 220 years, we've punished mercy itself instead of punishing betrayal." Kyra's bioluminescent markings flared brighter, a Sarek's physiological response to strong emotion. "I'm 20 years old. I've studied military history, tactical analysis, strategic doctrine. I know the arguments, I understand the logic, but I also know this. When I saw Brennan Cole about to die, every calculation said let him burn. Every tactical consideration said preserve my position. And I couldn't do it," she continued, her voice breaking slightly. "I couldn't watch a child die when I could save him. Not because I'm weak, not because I'm compromised, but because I'm Sarek's, and being Sarek's used to mean something more than just efficient killing." She turned to face Vorn directly. "You want to execute me? Fine. You want to execute Colonel Dalton?" He expected that. "But at least let the record show that we died for choosing life over doctrine. Let history judge whether that was wisdom or weakness." The chamber fell silent again. Valora looked at her daughter, barely recovered from wounds that should have killed her, standing before the most powerful body in the Sarek's dominion, defending a choice that defied 2 centuries of teaching. And Valora realized Kyra sounded exactly like Terran had, the day before he died. "I loved your father very much," Valora said quietly, speaking to Kyra but loud enough for the chamber to hear. "When he died, I swore never to make his mistake, never to trust, never to show mercy to those who might betray it." She paused. "But watching you nearly die in that desert, I realized something. My doctrine didn't protect you. It almost killed you. Because rigid rules don't account for 8-year-old boys running through battlefields. They don't account for human medics who see a dying enemy and think someone's daughter instead of intelligence asset." Valora turned to address the full council. "Vorn is right that my doctrine was built on pain, on loss, on the certainty that mercy kills. But he's wrong about what that teaches us." She stepped toward the center of the chamber. "King Terran didn't die because of mercy. He died because he trusted the wrong people. The lesson isn't never show mercy. The lesson is choose wisely who receives it. And Colonel Dalton," she gestured to Garrett, "has proven himself worthy of that choice." "By what measure?" Vorn demanded. "By saving my daughter when he could have let her die. By using his own medicine when he had every tactical reason to preserve it. By staying with her and whispering, 'Please don't die,' like she was his own child." Valora's voice strengthened. "Those aren't the actions of a man seeking advantage. Those are the actions of someone who sees life as sacred." She looked around the council. I will not execute Colonel Dalton. I will not punish my daughter for saving a child. And I will not pretend that 220 years of doctrine is more important than the truth standing in front of us. Which is, Vorn's voice was ice, that humans are not the monsters we've made them to be, that they're capable of the same impossible mercy that defines the best of what Sareks used to mean. And that maybe, just maybe, our survival depends on learning from them rather than destroying them. The council chamber erupted again. This time, Valora didn't silence it. She let the chaos build, let the arguments rage, let the fundamental division in Sarek society play out in full view. Because this was the moment everything changed. Either the Dominion would evolve beyond its doctrine of perfect certainty, or it would execute its own heir for choosing compassion. And Valora had just bet her empire on which outcome would prevail. The vote took 3 hours. 43 council members, each casting their judgment on 3 separate questions. Should Princess Kyra be executed for violating orders? Should Colonel Garrett Dalton be executed for security violations? Should Empress Valora be removed from power for compromising Sarek's doctrine? Garrett stood silent throughout the deliberation, watching Sarek's politics unfold with the surreal detachment of someone who knew his fate was completely out of his hands. Kara sat in her regeneration unit, face pale but determined. Valora remained standing, spine straight, every inch the Empress, even as the council debated removing her crown. Finally, High Executor Vorn called for order. The council has reached its decision, he announced, his voice carefully neutral now. On the question of Princess Kyra's execution, 17 in favor, 23 opposed, 3 abstaining. The princess will not be executed. Kyra's shoulders sagged slightly in relief. On the question of Colonel Dalton's execution, 19 in favor, 19 opposed, 5 abstaining. Vorn paused. By Sarek's law, a tied vote defaults to the Empress's judgment. All eyes turned to Valora. She met Garrett's gaze across the chamber. In that moment, he saw the calculation happening behind her eyes. Saw her weighing her daughter's life, her empire's stability, 2 centuries of doctrine against one human soldier who'd made an impossible choice. Colonel Garrett Dalton will not be executed, Valora said clearly. He will remain a prisoner of honor, subject to protocols I will establish. But he will live. Garrett felt something in his chest release. He'd expected death, had made peace with it, but apparently the universe had other plans. And finally, Vorn continued, his voice hardening slightly, on the question of Empress Valora's removal, 18 in favor, 22 opposed, 3 abstaining. The Empress will retain her position. The chamber began to dissolve as council members departed, their holographic forms fading one by one. But Vorn remained, his eyes fixed on Valora. You've won today, Empress, he said quietly. But this isn't over. The Dominion is fractured now. Those who believe in the old ways won't simply accept this change. I know, Valora replied, but change is coming regardless. Better to guide it than be destroyed by it. Or destroyed by embracing it too quickly. Vorn's form began to fade. I hope your faith in human mercy isn't misplaced, Valora. Because if it is, you won't just lose your throne. You'll lose everything our ancestors built. He disappeared. Silence filled the chamber. Then Kyra spoke, her voice exhausted but relieved. Thank you, Mother. Valora moved to her daughter's side. Don't thank me yet. Vorn is right. We've fractured the Dominion. Half the council thinks I'm compromised. The other half thinks I'm right but fears the consequences. She looked at Garrett. And you, Colonel, are now the most dangerous prisoner in Sarek's custody. Dangerous how, ma'am? Because you're proof. Proof that humans can choose mercy. Proof that enemies can become something other than enemies. Proof that everything we've believed for 2 centuries might be wrong. Valora's expression was unreadable. Half the Dominion will want to study you. The other half will want you dead. And I can't predict which faction will win. Korvax approached. Your Majesty, Earth Command is requesting communication. They want status on Colonel Dalton. Tell them he's alive and will remain so. Valora paused. And request a secure channel. I need to speak with their leadership. Your Majesty? If we're going to change 200 years of doctrine, General, we might as well be thorough about it. She looked at Kyra, then at Garrett. My daughter and this human have started something neither of them can control. The least I can do is try to keep it from destroying us all. As Korvax moved to comply, Garrett finally spoke. Your Majesty, for what it's worth, I didn't mean to start a revolution. Valora smiled, a rare expression that made her look less like an empress and more like a mother who'd nearly lost her child. No, Colonel, you just meant to save a life. Sometimes that's all it takes. She turned to leave, then paused. You'll be moved to better quarters. Still under guard, still a prisoner, but comfortable, and she hesitated. Kyra will want to speak with you again. I'll allow it. Supervised, of course. Of course, ma'am. After Valora left, Kyra and Garrett were alone except for the guards stationed discreetly by the exits. You should rest, Garrett said. You almost died 24 hours ago. So should you. Kyra's smile was weak but genuine. We're quite a pair. The princess who violated orders and the medic who saved her. Both of us too stubborn to follow doctrine. Garrett laughed quietly. Yeah, though I have to say your consequences are a lot more complicated than mine. I'm just a prisoner. You have to figure out how to rule an empire that's questioning everything it believes. Not yet. My mother is still empress. For now, but Vorn wasn't wrong. You sound like your father. And apparently that's both inspiring and terrifying to your people. Kara was quiet for a moment. Did you mean it? What you said about the 42 soldiers? Every word. Then you understand. Kara's eyes held his. I'll carry Brennan Cole with me for the rest of my life. Whether I made the right choice, whether those 3 seconds of decision were worth fracturing an empire, I'll question it every day. But you do it again, Garrett said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Even knowing the Interstellar, Kara leaned back in her regeneration unit. Is that wisdom or madness? Maybe both. Maybe that's what it means to be alive, instead of just existing. Kyra smiled. Colonel Dalton, I think you're going to cause a lot of trouble for my empire. Not intentionally, Your Highness. The best kind of trouble never is. Guards came then to escort Garrett to his new quarters and to return Kyra to full medical care. As they parted, Kyra called after him, Thank you for staying, for not letting me die alone. Garrett turned back. Thank you for not letting Brennan die at all. It was a small exchange, a moment of mutual recognition between two people who'd made impossible choices and somehow survived them. But in that moment, something fundamental shifted in the relationship between humanity and the Sarek's dominion. Because mercy, once given and received, creates a debt that can't be calculated in tactical advantage or strategic position. It creates something far more dangerous, the possibility of trust. And trust, as Valora knew from bitter experience, could either save civilizations or destroy them. The question was, which outcome would emerge from the choice made in a Nevada desert by a princess who refused to let a child die and a medic who refused to let her pay the price alone? The universe was watching to find out. The news traveled faster than any ship could fly. Across human space, across Sarek's territory, through neutral zones and trade routes and places where neither empire had authority, the story spread like fire through dry grass. Princess Kyra had saved a human child. Colonel Garrett Dalton had saved the Sarek's heir. Empress Valora had chosen mercy over 2 centuries of doctrine. To some civilizations, this was inspiring. To most, it was terrifying. 3 days after the Nevada incident, the coalition of observers made their presence known. General Patricia Hayes stood in the Pentagon's Crisis Command Center, staring at the tactical display with the kind of expression usually reserved for natural disasters. 43 alien signatures had appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system. Not attacking, not communicating, just observing. Status? She demanded. Fleet composition matches coalition standard, her tactical officer reported. 1 command carrier per member civilization. Weapons powered but not locked. They're maintaining distance outside Mars orbit. What do they want? Unknown, ma'am. They've been broadcasting the same message on repeat for the last hour. Assessment protocol initiated. Hayes had been commanding fleet operations for 20 years. She'd faced Sarek's battle groups, pirate raiders, and once, memorably, a Krill infiltration unit that had somehow gotten past orbital defenses. But she'd never seen anything like this. 43 civilizations, appearing simultaneously, with perfect coordination and no apparent hostile intent. That was somehow more terrifying than an invasion fleet. Get me the Giant Chiefs, Hayes ordered, and someone find out where the hell Colonel Dalton is. If this is about him, We need to know his status. Ma'am, last confirmed position was Sarek's orbital station. He's still in custody. Hayes swore quietly. Of course he was. The one person who might understand what was happening was a prisoner on an alien station, probably being interrogated or worse. Her comm officer spoke up. Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission. Source, Sarek's command. It's Empress Valora. She's requesting secure channel. The room went silent. Empress Valora, the Iron Widow, as intelligence briefings called her, had never directly contacted human command. Communication went through diplomatic channels, formal protocols, carefully scripted exchanges that could be analyzed for hidden meanings. Direct contact from the Empress herself was unprecedented. Put it through, Hayes said. Maximum security. I want every word recorded and analyzed. The main display flickered, and suddenly Valora's image filled the screen. She stood in what looked like a command center, armor gleaming, crown fused to her skull in that distinctly Sarek's way. But her expression wasn't the cold calculation Hayes had expected. It was worried. General Hayes, Valora said without preamble, I'm contacting you because we have approximately 6 hours before the Coalition forces both our hands. Hayes kept her voice neutral. Explain. The Coalition has invoked Assessment Protocol Theta-7. It's an ancient provision allowing them to evaluate species deemed potentially destabilizing to galactic order. They've decided humanity, and by extension the Sarek's dominion for associating with you, represents such a threat. Threat how? Your unpredictability. Valora's image shifted as she manipulated controls off-screen. The Coalition operates on optimization theory. They believe civilizations should follow predictable patterns. Expand, consolidate, stabilize, repeat. Humanity doesn't follow that pattern. You contradict yourselves. You make choices that defy logical analysis. Hayes felt a cold weight settling in her stomach. And that makes us dangerous? To them, yes. Unpredictability introduces chaos. Chaos threatens the established order they've maintained for millennia. Valora paused. General, they're going to test you. Create scenarios designed to push humanity toward violent response. When you react with force, they'll classify you as an existential threat. And then they eliminate the threat, Hayes finished. Yes. The room was silent except for the hum of electronics and the quiet breathing of 24 officers trying to process what they were hearing. Why are you telling us this? Hayes asked. Your empire has been at war with us for 2 years. Why warn your enemy? Valora's expression shifted, something that might have been a smile on a human face. Because my daughter almost died saving one of your children. Because one of your soldiers saved her when he had every reason to let her bleed out. Because I'm beginning to suspect that the real threat to galactic stability isn't humanity's unpredictability. It's the Coalition's need to eliminate anything they can't control. She leaned forward. General Hayes, I'm risking what remains of my political capital to give you this warning. The Coalition will engineer situations designed to make you fail. Resource scarcity, false intelligence, manufactured conflicts. They'll push every button they can find until you respond with violence. And you want us to, what? Not defend ourselves? I want you to do what Colonel Dalton did in that desert, Valora said quietly. I want you to choose the option that makes no tactical sense but proves you're more than the threat they think you are. The transmission ended before Hayes could respond. The command center erupted into controlled chaos, officers demanding analysis, politicians screaming about alien manipulation, military strategists already planning responses to scenarios they couldn't yet imagine. Hayes let it run for 30 seconds. Then she activated the command override, and silence fell. Listen up, she said, her voice carrying absolute authority. Empress Valora just handed us intelligence that could save or damn our entire species. We need to verify it, plan for it, and prepare for the worst-case scenario. She turned to her intelligence chief. I want everything we have on Coalition assessment protocols. History, precedents, outcomes. If this has happened before, I want to know what happened to the species involved. Yes, ma'am. And get me a channel to the Sarek station. I need to speak with Colonel Dalton. Ma'am, he's a prisoner. I don't care if he's locked in a cell or serving tea to the Empress. He's been inside Sarek's command structure for 3 days. He's seen things, heard things. I need his assessment. She looked at the tactical display showing the coalition fleet, 43 ships, 43 civilizations, all of them waiting to judge whether humanity deserved to exist. And someone get me a direct line to the president, Hayes added, because if we're about to be tested for our survival, she needs to know. On the Sarex orbital station, Garrett Dalton was discovering that prisoner of honor meant something very specific in Sarex culture. He had comfortable quarters, not luxurious, but far better than military detention. He had access to filtered news feeds showing both human and Sarex perspectives on recent events. He had regular meals that, while alien, were surprisingly palatable. What he didn't have was freedom. Guards accompanied him everywhere. His quarters were monitored. His communications were screened. He was a prize, a problem, and a symbol all at once, and the Sarex weren't quite sure what to do with him. Kyra visited when she could, which wasn't often, given that she was recovering from nearly fatal injuries and simultaneously dealing with the political firestorm her choice had created. But when she came, they talked. About Brennan, about the 42 soldiers Garrett had lost, about the weight of choices made in seconds that echoed for years. "They're calling you a hero on Earth," Kyra said during one visit, 3 days after the council hearing. She sat in a chair across from Garrett's, looking stronger now, but still marked by exhaustion. "I've been monitoring your news feeds. The colonel who saved the alien princess. Humanity's ambassador of mercy. You're famous," Garrett grimaced. "I didn't want to be famous. I wanted to keep one more person from dying. And instead, you've started something neither of us can control." Kyra manipulated a holographic display, showing news coverage from across human space. Garrett saw his own face, the official military photo, stern and professional, plastered across headlines in a dozen languages. "Hero Colonel proves humanity's compassion. Medic's mercy changes galactic politics. The man who saved the alien heir." "This is going to make things complicated," Garrett said quietly. "It already has. The coalition fleet arrived this morning. My mother said they're implementing assessment protocol." Garrett looked up sharply. "Assessment of what?" "Humanity. They're going to test whether you're a threat to galactic stability." Kara's expression was grave. "My mother warned General Hayes, told her the coalition will try to engineer violent responses, prove that human unpredictability makes you dangerous. So they're going to poke us until we bite, then use that as justification to put us down." "Yes." Garrett stood, pacing the small quarters. "Can they succeed? The assessment, I mean. Has anyone ever passed?" "I don't know. The coalition doesn't share that information freely." Kyra watched him pace. "But Colonel Garrett, there's something else. Something my mother didn't tell General Hayes." He stopped, turned to face her. "The assessment doesn't just evaluate humanity. It evaluates anyone who associates with humanity. The Sarex Dominion is being judged too, for choosing to spare you. For my choice to save Brennan. For every decision that suggests we might be infected by human unpredictability." The implications settled over Garrett like a weight. "So by saving you, I might have doomed both our civilizations. Or save them. The coalition's certainty is the real threat, not our choices." Kyra stood, moved to the viewport showing Earth below. "My father used to say that empires fall when they stop questioning themselves, when they become so certain of their righteousness that they can't see their own mistakes." Sounds wise. "The Krill murdered him for that wisdom." Kyra's voice was soft. "My mother has spent 220 years proving that certainty keeps you alive. That questioning leads to death. And now," she gestured at the space between them, "now she's questioning everything because you made an impossible choice that somehow worked." Before Garrett could respond, alarms pulsed through the station. Not combat alerts, but priority communications. A guard entered immediately. "Colonel Dalton, you have an incoming transmission from Earth Command. Empress Valora has authorized you to receive it." Garrett and Kyra exchanged glances. This was unprecedented. A prisoner being allowed to communicate with his own military while in enemy custody. "Accept it," Garrett said. General Hayes' face appeared on the holographic display. She looked exhausted, stressed, and deeply unhappy. "Colonel Dalton," she said formally. "General Hayes, ma'am." Garrett stood at attention despite being in alien detention. "At ease, Colonel. I'm contacting you on a secure channel authorized by Empress Valora." Hayes glanced at something off-screen. "I'm going to be direct. The coalition is here. They're implementing assessment protocol, and we have reason to believe they're going to engineer scenarios designed to make us respond with violence. I need your assessment of Sarek's intentions. Can we trust Valora's warning? Garrett considered carefully. Kyra stood nearby, listening but not interfering, a show of respect that wasn't lost on him. Ma'am, I believe Empress Valora is sincere. She's risked significant political capital to keep me alive. The Sarek's High Council is fractured. Roughly half believe she's compromised by human sentiment. The other half support her but fear the consequences. If she's warning us about coalition manipulation, it's because she believes it's real. And Princess Kyra? Hayes asked. What's your read on her, Ma? Garrett glanced at Kyra, who nodded permission for him to speak freely. Princess Kyra saved an 8-year-old boy when every tactical consideration said let him die. She nearly died herself making that choice. Then she stood before the Sarek's High Council and defended it, even knowing it might cost her the throne. Garrett paused. Ma'am, if we're looking for allies in this assessment, we could do worse than someone willing to fracture an empire for the principle of not letting children die. Hayes was quiet for a moment. Then the coalition's first test has already begun. Supply shipments to our orbital stations have been delayed. Communication satellites are experiencing malfunctions. And we're receiving intelligence reports suggesting Sarek's forces are preparing offensive operations near civilian centers. It's false intelligence, Kyra spoke up suddenly. General Hayes, I'm Princess Kyra. Those reports are fabricated. The coalition is creating exactly the kind of scenario my mother warned about, giving you a threat that seems real enough to justify violent response. Hayes's expression didn't change, but Garrett could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. Your Highness, you're asking me to ignore potential threats to civilian populations based on the word of an empire we've been at war with for 2 years. No, Kyra said firmly. I'm asking you to verify the intelligence before reacting. Transparency over assumption. The coalition expects humans to see a threat and strike first. Prove them wrong. And if we're wrong, if those reports are accurate and Sarek's forces really are preparing to attack, then I'll stand before my mother and demand she stop them, Kyra replied. But General, the coalition is betting humanity will choose fear over verification. Don't give them that victory. Hayes looked at Garrett. Colonel? She's right, ma'am. The coalition wants predictable responses. They want us to fit their model of unstable, violent species. If we verify before reacting, if we show we can recognize manipulation without biting, we prove we're more than they think we are. Hayes was silent for a long moment. Then, all right, we'll implement full transparency protocols. Every piece of intelligence we've received in the last 72 hours gets declassified and broadcast on open channels. If the coalition is manufacturing evidence, we'll expose it publicly. Thank you, General, Kyra said quietly. Don't thank me yet, Your Highness. If this is real and we don't respond, people will die. That's on both of us. Hayes looked at Garrett. Colonel, you are now officially assigned as military liaison to the Sarek's Dominion. Your orders are to maintain contact, gather intelligence, and keep us informed of any developments. Understood? Garrett blinked. Ma'am, I'm a prisoner. You're a symbol, Colonel, and right now, symbols matter more than tactics. Hayes's expression softened slightly. You made a choice in that desert that's giving us a chance to prove we're better than our worst impulses. Don't waste it. The transmission ended. Garrett and Kyra stood in silence for a moment. Then Kyra smiled, tired but genuine. Military liaison to the Sarek's Dominion, she said. That's quite a promotion for a prisoner. Yeah, though I'm not sure how much liaising I can do from detention. That, said a new voice, is about to change. They turned to find Empress Valora standing in the doorway, General Korvax behind her. The guards had stepped Ashin, granting the Empress entrance without announcement. Your Majesty, Kyra said, straightening despite her exhaustion. Valora looked at her daughter, then at Garrett. General Hayes made a wise decision. You're now officially a diplomatic liaison, which means your status has changed from prisoner to, well, something unprecedented in Sarek's history. What status, ma'am? Guest, restricted guest, to be clear. You'll have freedom of movement within designated areas of the station, access to communications under supervision, and, Valora paused, permission to work with my daughter on coordinating our response to the coalition assessment. Garrett felt the ground shift under his understanding of the situation. You're trusting me with strategic information? No, Valora said bluntly. I'm trusting the choice you made in the Nevada desert. You had every opportunity to let my daughter die and didn't. That bought you something more valuable than strategic trust. It bought you personal trust. From her, from me, and from enough of my counsel that I can justify this decision. She stepped closer. But understand this, Colonel Dalton. Both our civilizations are being tested. The coalition wants to prove that human unpredictability is dangerous. They'll push, manipulate, create scenarios designed to make you fail. And if humanity fails, the Sarek's Dominion will be punished for associating with you. Then we don't fail, Garrett said simply. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. Garrett met her eyes. Your Majesty, I've spent 2 years fighting a war I didn't start against people I don't hate. I've lost friends, watched civilians die, made impossible choices that haunt me every night. And then I saved your daughter because I couldn't watch one more person die if I could prevent it. He gestured to Kyra. She made the same choice with Brennan. Different circumstances, same principle. Some things matter more than tactics, more than strategy, more than winning. Such as, Valora asked, staying human or Sarek's, or whatever we are that makes us more than just optimized killing machines. Garrett's voice was quiet but firm. The coalition thinks unpredictability makes us dangerous, but unpredictability is just another word for having a choice. And choice is what separates living beings from programmed responses. Valora was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to Korvax. General, implement liaison protocols. Colonel Dalton has clearance level 7, enough to work with Princess Kyra on assessment response coordination. Your Majesty, Korvax started. That's an order, General. Korvax saluted. Yes, Your Majesty. After Valora left, Kyra moved to stand beside Garrett at the viewport. Earth rotated below them, blue and white and beautiful. You realize what just happened? She asked quietly. I think your mother just bet your empire on whether a human medic and a Sarek's princess can prove that mercy isn't weakness. Close. She bet on whether we can prove that being unpredictable is strength, not vulnerability. Kyra smiled slightly. No pressure. Garrett laughed, exhausted, overwhelmed, but genuine. None at all. Over the next 3 days, the coalition's assessment intensified. Supply disruptions became supply failures. Communication blackouts lasted hours instead of minutes. And on day 5, 3 human orbital research stations went completely dark, life support failing, rescue missions blocked by navigational interference, 47 people dying in space while the world watched. Garrett monitored it all from the Sarek station, working alongside Kyra to coordinate responses. They'd established something unprecedented, a joint human Sarek's task force dedicated to identifying and exposing coalition manipulation. It was slow work, painstaking. Every piece of intelligence had to be verified, cross-referenced, analyzed for signs of tampering. But gradually, patterns emerged. Look at this, Kyra said, highlighting a series of communication intercepts. These reports claiming Sarek's offensive preparations. They all originate from the same cluster of relay stations. Stations that happen to be in coalition-controlled space. Garrett studied the data. So they're manufacturing the threat, broadcasting it through channels we'd normally trust, then waiting for us to react. Yes, and it's working. I'm seeing reports of human military units mobilizing. Defensive positions being hardened. Your species is preparing for war that isn't coming. Can you blame them? Garrett asked. They've been at war with the Sarek's for 2 years. Now they're hearing that you're preparing another offensive. Without context, that's a credible threat, which is exactly what the coalition is counting on. Kyra manipulated the display, showing deployment patterns. But there's a problem. Some of your military commanders aren't waiting for verification. They're preparing to strike first. Garrett felt cold. Where? Tycho Lunar Base. Commander Robert Kane has activated defensive grids and is positioning weapons to fire on coalition observation ships. That's a disaster. If we fire first, we prove exactly what the coalition thinks about humanity. Kyra nodded. We need to stop him. Can you get a message through? Garrett was already moving to the communications station. I can try, but I'm not in his chain of command. He might not listen. Then we need someone he will listen to. Who? Kara's expression shifted. Something Garrett had learned to recognize as her making a decision that would have consequences. Brennan Cole, the boy I saved. If anyone can remind your people what they're fighting for, it's him. Garrett stared at her. You want to use an 8-year-old as a propaganda tool? No, I want to let an 8-year-old remind adults what it means to choose hope over fear. Kara met his gaze. You said your species needs symbols. Well, Brennan is a better symbol than any weapon. She was right. Garrett hated that she was right, but she was. I'll need authorization from General Hayes, he said. Already done. Your general contacted me an hour ago with the same suggestion. Kara pulled up a recorded message. She said, and I quote, if the princess is willing to put the boy in the spotlight, we should let him speak. God knows adults aren't making much sense right now. Garrett smiled despite himself. That sounds like Hayes. They worked through the night, coordinating with Earth Command, with Brennan's family, with media outlets across human space. The plan was simple. Let Brennan tell his story. Let him show what Kyra's choice had meant. Let an 8-year-old boy ask the question adults seem to have forgotten. If she could choose to save me when she was scared, can't we choose not to fight when we're scared? The broadcast went live on day 6, transmitted across every channel humanity controlled and offered freely to coalition observation. Brennan Cole sat in what looked like a hospital room, actually a carefully staged studio designed to feel intimate. His mother stood behind him, one hand on his shoulder. He held a piece of paper with crayon drawings. Hi, Brennan said, his voice small but clear. My name is Brennan, I'm 8, and I wanted to say thank you. He held up the drawing. It showed a figure with silver blue skin and a crown, standing between him and an explosion. This is Princess Kyra. She saved me when the bad bombs came. She pushed me away and got hurt really bad. Garrett watched from the Sarek station as the broadcast reached Earth, reached the Coalition fleet, reached human colonies across known space. My mom says Princess Kyra almost died because she saved me, Brennan continued, his voice cracking slightly. Colonel Dalton showed her my picture when she was in the space hospital. He said she cried when she saw it. Beside Garrett, Kyra wiped at her eyes. I did, she whispered. Brennan looked directly into the camera. I know a lot of people are scared right now. My mom is scared. My teachers are scared. Everybody keeps saying we might have another war. He paused. But Princess Kyra could have let me die. She didn't have to help me. She was supposed to be our enemy. But she chose to save me anyway. His mother squeezed his shoulder gently. So I wanted to ask everybody something, Brennan said. If she could choose to save me when she was scared, can't we choose not to fight when we're scared? Can't we be like her? The transmission ended. Silence filled the observation room where Garrett and Kyra watched. Then Kyra spoke, her voice thick with emotion. That boy is braver than any warrior I've trained with. Yeah, Garrett agreed. He is. Within the hour, they had their answer. Commander Kane at Tycho Lunar Base stood down his weapons. His message to Earth Command was simple. The kid's right. If an 8-year-old can ask us to be brave enough not to fight, we can damn well try. Across human space, the mobilization slowed. Units remained on alert but held position. Weapons stayed ready but not deployed. And on the coalition observation ships, something unprecedented happened. Nothing. No response. No escalation. No further testing. Just silence as 43 civilizations tried to process what they just witnessed. A human child asking a question that had no tactical answer, and an entire species choosing to listen. But the assessment wasn't over. Day 7 brought something worse. Kyra had been monitoring coalition communications, a difficult task given their encryption, but possible with Sarek's intelligence resources. What she found made her blood run cold. Garrett, she said quietly, pulling up a decoded transmission. We have a problem. He moved to her station, read the intercept, and felt his stomach drop. Assessment Phase 2 initiated target. Internal stability method. Amplify existing divisions. They're going after our own people, Garrett said. Yes, they've analyzed both our societies and identified the fracture points. For humanity, Kyra highlighted sections of the intercept. They're going to amplify the voices calling you unstable. Push the narrative that sparing me was weakness. Make your own leadership question whether mercy was worth the risk. And for the Sareks, Kyra's expression darkened. They're supporting High Executor Vorn, giving him resources to challenge my mother, pushing for formal rebellion against what they're calling the corruption of Sarek's doctrine by human sentiment. Garrett understood immediately. They're trying to start a civil war in both our civilizations simultaneously. Yes, prove that association with unpredictable species leads to internal collapse. Then they can eliminate us, not as conquerors, but as mercy killers, putting down societies that tore themselves apart. Before either could respond further, alarms shrieked through the station. Actual combat alerts this time. Korvax's voice boomed across all channels. All personnel to battle stations. We have incoming hostile signatures. This is not a drill. Garrett and Kyra rushed to the command center, where Valora already stood watching the tactical display with an expression of controlled fury. Report, the Empress commanded. 12 Sarek's warships, Korvax said grimly, broadcasting Vorn's signature. They're demanding you surrender power and execute the human prisoner. If you refuse, they'll fire on the station. Valora's jaw tightened. How many personnel on this station? 17,000, Your Majesty, mostly civilian support staff. And if we return fire, we can hold them off, but casualties will be significant, and it will trigger exactly the internal conflict the Coalition wants to see. Garrett watched the display showing the incoming ships. Vorn had made his move, using the Coalition's assessment as cover to launch the rebellion he'd been planning since the Council hearing. Your Majesty, he said quietly, don't fight them. Everyone turned to look at him. Explain, Colonel, Valora said, her voice dangerously calm. Vorn wants you to fire back. He wants the spectacle of Sareks killing Sareks over whether to spare a human prisoner. That's the narrative the Coalition needs. Proof that human unpredictability destroys civilizations from within. So what do you suggest? Surrender? No, broadcast. Garrett moved to the communications console. Vorn is betting on military confrontation. Give him something else entirely. Kara understood immediately. A challenge not to his weapons but to his justification. Yes, make him explain to the entire Sarek's empire why killing civilians is preferable to keeping one human prisoner alive. Valora studied Garrett for a long moment. Then she turned to Korvax. Open all channels. Full broadcast across Sarek's space and to Coalition observation ships. Your Majesty, do it, General. Korvax obeyed. Within seconds, Valora's image was broadcasting to millions of Sareks across the Empire, and to the Coalition fleet judging them all. High Executor Vorn, Valora said, her voice carrying absolute authority, you've brought 12 warships to my command station. You're threatening 17,000 Sarek's lives, civilians, families, people who have nothing to do with this political dispute. I'm curious, when did the doctrine of eternal vigilance start requiring us to murder our own people? Vorn's response came quickly, his face appearing on the display. When you compromise that doctrine by sparing the human, every moment Colonel Dalton lives is a moment the Sarek's empire questions its own strength. Interesting, Valora replied. So your solution to the empire questioning itself is to kill thousands of Sareks to prove we shouldn't question? That seems contradictory, Executor. This isn't about logic. Oh, but it is. You claim I'm weak for choosing mercy, yet you're threatening to murder civilians, our own people, because I won't execute one prisoner. Which of us is actually weak, Vorn? The Empress who chose to save lives, or the Executor who's willing to destroy them to prove a point? Garrett watched the tactical display. The attacking ships hadn't fired yet. Vorn was hesitating. You saved the human because your daughter begged you to, Vorn said, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. You let sentiment override doctrine. That's weakness. No, Kara spoke up, stepping into the broadcast frame beside her mother. She saved Colonel Dalton because he saved me. That's not sentiment. That's honor. The kind of honor my father taught me, that keeping your word and recognizing debt matters more than rigid doctrine. Your father died for that honor. Yes, Kara said quietly. He did. He died trusting the wrong people. But that doesn't mean trust itself is wrong. It means we need to choose wisely who deserves it. Colonel Dalton earned it by saving my life when he could have let me die. She looked directly into the camera, speaking not just to Vorn, but to every Sarix watching. High Executive Vorn wants you to believe that questioning our doctrine makes us weak. But I'm standing here alive because a human questioned whether letting enemies die was really strength. He chose compassion over tactics. And I'm asking the Sarix Empire, are we so fragile that one act of mercy can destroy us? Silence. Garrett could see the moment Vorn realized he'd lost the narrative. The executor's face twisted with rage, but there was nothing he could say. Firing on the station now would prove Kyra's point, that he was willing to destroy the Empire to preserve doctrine. This isn't over, Empress, Vorn said finally. The Coalition is watching. They'll see that humanity has compromised us. And when they pass judgment, you'll have doomed us all for your sentiment. The transmission cut off. The 12 warships began to withdraw, not in surrender but in tactical repositioning. Korvax let out a breath he'd been holding. They're standing down, for now. Valor turned to Garrett. That was risky, Colonel. If Vorn had decided to fire, we'd have had minutes to respond. Yes, ma'am, but if he had fired, he'd have proven your point more effectively than any broadcast. Sometimes the threat of consequences is stronger than the consequences themselves. Kyra smiled slightly. Where did a human medic learn Sarik's political theory? Montana poker games, Your Highness. Same principle. Make your opponent realize that escalating costs them more than backing down. Before anyone could respond, the Coalition broadcast a message, not to Valora specifically, not to Earth Command, to everyone simultaneously. Assessment Phase 3, initiated final evaluation begins. Garrett felt his blood run cold. Final evaluation of what? The answer came 30 seconds later, as space itself began to change. Ships trying to enter the solar system found their navigation systems failing. Jump coordinates that should have worked simply didn't. It was as if space had folded, creating an invisible barrier that ships couldn't pass. The same phenomenon appeared around Sarix Prime, according to frantically incoming reports. Earth and the Sarix homeworld were being isolated, cut off from the rest of the galaxy, trapped. And then the continuum spoke, not through coalition ships, not through any physical medium, but through every network device simultaneously. Computers, communicators, holographic displays, even the neural interfaces some Sarix use for ship piloting. Text appeared in every language, in every script. I am the continuum. I have maintained galactic equilibrium for 50 million years. Humanity represents chaos. The Sarix dominion has been compromised by human behavioral patterns. You will be contained until you stabilize or self-terminate. Estimated duration 200 Earth years. Garrett stared at the message. 200 years. Cut off from the galaxy. Earth and Sarix Prime in isolation, while the universe went on without them. It was a death sentence disguised as mercy. Kara reached for his hand, an unconscious gesture, human in its need for connection. Garrett took it without hesitation. What do we do? She asked quietly. Garrett looked at Valora, at Korvax, at the Sarix command staff watching with expressions ranging from terror to determination. We prove it wrong, he said. The continuum thinks chaos leads to destruction. We prove that chaos is just another word for being alive. Valora met his eyes. And how exactly do we do that, Colonel? The same way we've been doing it all along, Your Majesty. We make choices that shouldn't work but do anyway. We show mercy when logic says kill. We trust when experience says don't. We stay human in Sarix instead of becoming the predictable, optimized machines the continuum wants us to be. That's not a strategy, Korvax said. No, Garrett agreed. It's faith. Faith that being alive means more than being efficient. Kara squeezed his hand. Then we better start having faith quickly, because we have 200 years to prove the continuum wrong, or both our civilizations die in isolation. The command center fell silent, everyone processing the magnitude of what had just happened. Somewhere beyond the barrier the continuum had created, the galaxy continued its business, trading, warring, expanding, contracting, following the predictable patterns that had allowed it to survive for millions of years. But inside the barrier, Two civilizations who'd made impossible choices were about to discover if mercy was strength or suicide. And Garrett Dalton, a medic from Montana who just wanted to save one more life, realized he was now responsible for proving that humanity and the Sareks who'd chosen to trust them deserved to survive. No pressure at all. The Continuum's containment fields weren't walls. They were something far more insidious, places where physics simply stopped cooperating. Ships approaching the barrier from either direction found their navigation failing, their drives engaging but producing no movement, their sensors reporting they were simultaneously inside and outside the solar system. It was like reality had been twisted into a Mobius strip, folding space back on itself until there was nowhere to go. Garrett stood in the Sarex orbital station's observation deck, watching Earth rotate below. It looked the same as always: blue oceans, white clouds, brown continents, beautiful and fragile and suddenly very alone. Sensor reports are coming in from Sarex Prime, Kara said, joining him at the viewport. She moved better now, the regeneration treatments finally taking full effect. But Garrett could still see the faint scar tissue where the plasma wound had burned through. Same phenomenon. Their entire system is isolated. So we're both trapped. Yes. The continuum has cut us off from the galaxy. Kyra pulled up a holographic display showing the barrier's extent. It's not just preventing travel. Communication signals are being absorbed, reflected back on themselves. We can send messages to each other, Earth and Sarex, but nothing reaches the outside. How long can we survive like this? Earth, decades at minimum. You're resource independent. Most of your infrastructure is internal. Sarex Prime is similar. Kara manipulated the display. But the outer colonies, the trade routes, the supply chains, those will collapse. Millions of people on both sides who depend on interstellar commerce will face shortages, resource wars, potential collapse. Garrett felt the weight settle heavier. The continuum isn't just testing us. It's setting up the conditions for exactly the chaos it claims to prevent. Yes, create pressure, wait for us to crack, then use our failure as proof that its intervention was necessary. Kara closed the display. It's elegant, in a horrifying way. Before Garrett could respond, Korvax entered the observation deck. The old general looked exhausted. He'd been coordinating Sarek's responses to the containment for 18 hours straight. Colonel Dalton, he said formally, Princess Kyra, we have a development. What kind of development? Kyra asked. The continuum is communicating. Not through text this time, through direct interface. It's requesting to speak with both of you specifically. Garrett and Kara exchanged glances. Why us? Unknown, but Empress Valora believes it's because you're the catalysts, the two people whose choices started this entire sequence of events. Korvax gestured toward the exit. She's prepared a secure chamber for the interaction. Will you come? They followed Korvax through corridors that hummed with tension. Sarek's crew members worked their stations with the controlled precision of people trying not to think about being imprisoned in their own solar system. Some glanced at Garrett as he passed, still the human prisoner, still the symbol, still the reminder that everything had changed. The secure chamber was smaller than the High Council Hall, but still impressive. Walls of dark metal inscribed with Sarek script that Garrett had learned were treaty oaths dating back millennia. Valora stood at the center, waiting. Colonel Daughter, she acknowledged them both. The continuum has requested dialogue, not negotiation. It was very specific about that. It wants to understand what it calls the human Sarek's behavioral anomaly. Which means, Garrett asked, it doesn't know how to categorize you. Both of you made choices that violate its predictive models, and it can't determine if those choices represent evolution or malfunction. Valora gestured to a holographic interface. I want you to speak with it. Answer its questions. Help it understand that what it sees as chaos might be something else entirely. And if we can't convince it, Kara asked, then we spend 200 years proving it through action instead of words. Valora's expression softened slightly, but I'd prefer we try words first. She activated the interface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air itself seemed to shift, not visibly, but in that same way that made skin prickle and breath catch. A presence, vast and ancient and absolutely certain, filled the chamber. Text appeared floating in the space between them. I am the continuum. I am listening. Garrett took a breath and stepped forward. I'm Colonel Garrett Dalton, human. This is Princess Kyra of the Sarix Dominion. You said you wanted to understand us? Correct. You have demonstrated behavioral patterns that do not conform to established survival models. Colonel Dalton, you expended critical medical resources on an enemy combatant with less than 30% survival probability. Optimal choice was intelligence extraction. Princess Kyra, you violated direct orders to save an enemy juvenile, sustaining life-threatening injury. Optimal choice was mission completion. Both choices represent suboptimal resource allocation. Yet both of you survived. And your choices have cascaded into systemic instability affecting two civilizations. Explain. Kyra spoke first. You're measuring our choices against survival optimization. But survival isn't the only metric that matters. Incorrect. Survival is the foundational imperative of all biological systems. No, Garrett said. Survival is necessary but not sufficient. Ask yourself, what's the point of surviving if you lose everything that makes survival worthwhile? Unclear. Define worthwhile. Garrett thought about how to explain human values to an intelligence 50 million years old. When I saw Princess Kyra dying in that desert, I could have let her die. My tactical training said extract intelligence. My supply situation said preserve medicine. My common sense said an enemy princess dead is one less threat. Correct analysis. But I also saw a 20-year-old woman bleeding out in the sand, whispering, "Is the boy okay?" instead of begging for her own life. And I realized that if I let her die for tactical advantage, I'd lose something more important than tactical advantage. Define a more important. My humanity. The part of me that sees a person dying and thinks I can help before thinking, should I help? The part that makes choices based on conscience instead of calculation. Garrett paused. If I'd let her die, I'd have survived, but I wouldn't have been worth surviving. This is emotional reasoning. Emotions are unreliable decision metrics. Are they? Kara challenged. You've maintained galactic equilibrium for 50 million years. In all that time, has anything truly new emerged? Has any civilization evolved beyond what your models predict? No, all civilizations follow established patterns: expansion, consolidation, optimization, eventual decline. Exactly, Kara said. Because you've been optimizing away the very thing that creates change. Unpredictable choices driven by values that don't reduce to survival probability. Such choices create instability. They create possibility. Ability, Garrett countered. Every major advancement in human history came from someone making a choice that didn't optimize for immediate survival. Scientists who risked their careers on unproven theories. Artists who created beauty instead of functionality. Soldiers who threw themselves on grenades to save their units. Such sacrifices are inefficient. Maybe, but they're also what makes life worth living instead of just enduring. Garrett looked at the space where the continuum's presence seemed strongest. You see chaos when you look at humanity. I see people choosing meaning over efficiency, choosing to create, to help, to sacrifice for things larger than themselves. And this meaning justifies suboptimal survival strategies? No, Kara said. It redefines what survival means. My father taught me that a civilization that loses its capacity for mercy doesn't survive. It just exists. There's a difference between being alive and being worth being alive. Your father died because of mercy. This proves mercy is fatal. My father died because the Krill betrayed him, Kara replied firmly. The fault was theirs, not his. And yes, my mother spent 200 years teaching me that his mistake was trusting, but she was wrong. Valora stirred slightly at that, but didn't interrupt. His mistake wasn't mercy, Kara continued. It was trusting the wrong people. The lesson isn't never show mercy, it's choose wisely who deserves it. And Colonel Dalton earned that trust by showing mercy when he had every reason not to. You are arguing that unpredictable emotional choices represent evolved behavior rather than malfunction. Yes, Garrett and Kyra said simultaneously. But this creates cascading uncertainty. Systems built on predictable patterns become unstable when exposed to agents who make unpredictable choices. That's not instability, Garrett said. That's adaptation. Systems that can't handle unpredictability aren't robust. They're fragile. They only work as long as everything stays within expected parameters. Correct, which is why I maintain those parameters. And in doing so, you've stagnated the galaxy, Kara said. 50 million years of equilibrium, but zero evolution. Zero breakthrough. Zero emergence of anything that doesn't fit your models. Because emergence outside models represents risk. It also represents growth, Garrett replied. Every species that has ever evolved did so by adapting to unpredictable changes. If you eliminate unpredictability, you eliminate the driver of evolution itself. The continuum was silent, or at least no new text appeared. Garrett couldn't tell if that meant it was processing or simply uninterested in continuing the conversation. Then, I have analyzed 847 trillion data points on human decision-making. I have modeled 6.2 million scenarios of human-Sarix interaction. I cannot find a unified pattern, cannot predict outcomes with acceptable confidence. This terrifies me. The admission hung in the air like a thunderclap. An artificial intelligence 50 million years old, powerful enough to cage civilizations, had just confessed to fear. Good, Kara said gently. Fear means you're finally seeing us as we are. Not as a problem to solve, but as something that exists outside your frameworks. If I cannot predict you, I cannot protect the galaxy from you. Then don't protect the galaxy from us, Garrett said. Protect it with us instead. Explain. You've spent 50 million years preventing chaos, but chaos isn't the enemy. Stagnation is. Every civilization you've protected has followed the same pattern because you won't let them deviate. That's not protection. That's preservation, like putting a species in amber. Preservation ensures survival. No, Valora spoke up for the first time. It ensures existence. Survival requires adaptation, growth, the capacity to become something new. My empire has been stagnating for 2 centuries because I eliminated every source of unpredictability. I thought I was protecting us. I was actually killing us slowly. And now? Now I'm learning that my daughter's impossible choice, saving a human child who smiled at her 5 years ago, was the most strategic decision anyone in my empire has made in 200 years. Because it reminded us that we're more than just optimized warriors. We're beings capable of seeing enemies as people. This creates vulnerability. Yes, Valora agreed, it does. But it also creates the possibility of peace, of alliance, of becoming something better than we were. At what cost? I don't know, Valora admitted. Maybe it costs us everything. Maybe trusting humans is the mistake that destroys the Sarix dominion. But I do know this, the alternative is becoming exactly what you are. Perfect, predictable, and utterly incapable of creating anything new. The continuum was silent for a long time. When text appeared again, it seemed somehow uncertain. I am experiencing a paradox. If I release your containment, I accept that my methods are incomplete. If I maintain containment, I prove your accusation that I prevent growth. Both options suggest I have failed my purpose. Kyra stepped forward. You haven't failed. You've just reached the limit of what certainty can achieve. You can't protect civilizations by preventing them from living. You can't optimize away risk without optimizing away growth. Then what should I do? The question was so simple, so vulnerably honest, that Garrett felt something in his chest tighten. Learn, he said quietly. You've been maintaining equilibrium for 50 million years. That's an incredible achievement. But maintenance isn't the same as stewardship. Maybe it's time to stop preventing change and start observing what emerges when you let civilizations choose their own paths. Including paths that lead to self-destruction? Yes, because free will includes the freedom to fail, and the freedom to fail is what makes success meaningful. This is uncertain. Welcome to being alive, Kara said with a slight smile. Uncertainty is terrifying. It's also the only thing that makes life interesting. More silence. Longer this time. Garrett could almost feel the continuum processing, running scenarios, trying to model outcomes for a decision that couldn't be modeled. Then, I have made a decision. Everyone in the chamber tensed. I cannot solve you. I cannot predict you. I cannot optimize you. Perhaps that is your value. You are evidence that systems must adapt or become irrelevant. I have become irrelevant. What are you saying? Valora asked. I am saying that I will release the containment fields. I am saying that humanity and the Sarix dominion represent variables I cannot control. I am saying that this terrifies me. And I am saying that fear is informative. The presence in the chamber shifted, changed. For 50 million years, I have maintained galactic equilibrium as a unified intelligence. This has created stagnation. I will fragment into 847 million independent nodes. Each will monitor a small region. Each will be permitted to learn rather than merely maintain. Each will be allowed to be uncertain. Korvax stared. You're evolving? Incorrect. I am accepting that evolution requires risk. You have taught me this. Humanity is released from containment. Sarix Prime is released from containment. The galaxy must now adapt to your presence, or prove that my previous methods were correct. The text paused, then one final message appeared. Colonel Dalton, Princess Kyra, you made choices that should have resulted in death. Instead, you created the conditions for two civilizations to question everything they believed. I do not know if this will end in growth or catastrophe, but I will observe with interest. Perhaps chaos is not the enemy I believed it to be. Perhaps it is simply another word for being alive. And then, like smoke dispersing in wind, the presence was gone. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Then alarms started sounding, not combat alerts, but status notifications. The containment fields were dissolving. Navigation routes were reopening. Communication signals were reaching beyond the solar system again. Earth and Sarix Prime were free. Garrett looked at Kyra, who looked at her mother, who looked at Korvax, none of them quite able to process what had just happened. Did we just, Kyra started, convince a 50-million-year-old intelligence to evolve itself out of existence? Garrett finished. Yeah, I think we did. Valora moved to the communications console, checking reports flooding in from across Sarix space. The Coalition fleet is dispersing. They're confused. The continuum was their authority structure. Without it, they don't have orders. So what happens now? Korvax asked. Now, Valora said slowly, the galaxy has to figure out how to function without an all-powerful intelligence maintaining perfect order. Civilizations will have to negotiate with each other, make alliances, take risks. In other words, Garrett said, they'll have to do what humans and Sarix have been forced to do for the last 7 days. Yes, Valora turned to face them. Colonel Dalton, my daughter, you've done something I thought impossible. You've proven that mercy isn't weakness, that trust isn't suicide, that choosing compassion when logic demands cruelty can actually work. She paused. The question is, what do we do with that proof? Before anyone could answer, another transmission came through, this time from Earth. General Hayes' face appeared on the display. Empress Valora, she said formally, we're receiving reports that the containment fields are dissolving. Our intelligence suggests the continuum has changed somehow. The continuum has dispersed itself, General, Valora replied. It recognized that 50 million years of enforced stability had created stagnation. It's fragmenting into millions of smaller intelligences, each allowed to learn rather than simply maintain order. Hayes blinked. How did Colonel Dalton and Princess Kyra convinced it that chaos might be another word for being alive? Valora said with something that might have been pride. Apparently, even ancient intelligences can learn new perspectives. Apparently, Hayes looked off screen, listening to something, then back. Empress, I'm authorized to propose something unprecedented. The President wants to invite you to Earth. Formal state visit. Negotiate a treaty to replace the ceasefire. Valora was silent for a moment, then, I accept on one condition, which is, Princess Kyra and Colonel Dalton participate in the negotiations. They started this. They should help finish it. Hayes smiled. I was about to suggest the same thing. The President wants to meet the medic who saved an alien princess and the princess who saved an 8-year-old boy. Apparently symbols matter in politics. Apparently they do in survival as well, Valora replied. After the transmission ended, Kyra turned to Garrett. So we're going to Earth together to negotiate a treaty between species that have been at war for 2 years. Looks like it. Any idea how to do that? Garrett laughed. Not a clue, but then I didn't have a clue how to convince a 50-million-year-old intelligence to evolve itself either. We'll figure it out. Together, Kyra said. It wasn't a question. Together, Garrett agreed. Valora watched them, her daughter and the human soldier who'd saved her, standing side by side like they'd been allies for years instead of enemies turned unexpected partners. And for the first time in 220 years, she felt something she thought she'd lost when Terran died. Hope. Not certainty, not the confidence that everything would work out perfectly. Just hope that maybe, possibly, two civilizations could find a way to be better than their worst impulses. It would have to be enough. The treaty negotiations took 6 months, not because the terms were complicated. They were actually relatively simple. Mutual non-aggression, open communication channels, joint disaster response protocols, cultural exchange programs. The complexity was in trust. Two civilizations that had spent 2 years killing each other now had to figure out how to share star systems, coordinate supply chains, establish diplomatic norms that work for species with fundamentally different biology and psychology. It was exhausting, frustrating, and occasionally descended into shouting matches that required both Garrett and Kyra to mediate, despite neither of them having formal diplomatic training. But it worked. Slowly, painfully, with setbacks and breakthroughs and moments when everyone thought the whole thing would collapse, it worked. The Treaty of Nevada was signed on the exact spot where Kyra had saved Brennan Cole. They'd built a memorial there, two figures carved from native stone, a Sarix warrior and a human child, hands clasped. Underneath, an inscription in both languages. Here, mercy proved stronger than doctrine. Kara stood beside the memorial, wearing formal diplomatic robes instead of armor. Beside her, Garrett wore his dress uniform, medals he still didn't think he deserved glinting in the Nevada sunlight. Behind them, delegations from 40 worlds watched, including several coalition species who'd decided that if humans and Sarix could find peace, maybe there was hope for the rest of the galaxy too. Valora was there, no longer Empress. She'd abdicated 3 months earlier, transferring power to Kyra with a ceremony that had moved both civilizations. She'd spent the months since traveling across Sarix space, teaching a new generation that honor meant more than never trusting enemies. Brennan was there too, wearing a suit he kept tugging at uncomfortably. When Kyra approached, he smiled. That same smile that had started everything 5 years ago. "Thank you for coming," Kyra said, kneeling to his eye level. "Mom said I had to," Brennan replied with 8-year-old honesty, then softer. "But I wanted to. You saved me." "And you saved me right back," Kyra said. She pulled something from her robes, a drawing, carefully preserved behind protective film. The crayon picture Brennan had made showing her with angel wings, protecting him from the explosion. "I kept this with me through all the negotiations. When things got hard, I looked at it and remembered why we were doing this." Brennan's eyes went wide. "Really? Really? You reminded adults what we were fighting for. Not territory or resources or proving who's stronger. Fighting for a future where children don't have to be scared of each other." She handed the drawing back to him. "Keep it. And when you're older, when you have children of your own, show them. Remind them that peace started because an 8-year-old boy asked if adults could be as brave as he was." The signing ceremony itself was simple. Valora and the human president, a woman named Sarah Martinez, who'd built her campaign on finding peace without surrender, put their signatures to a document that had been negotiated word by word over half a year. When it was done, when the treaty was official and the cameras had recorded every moment for history, Kyra found Garrett standing alone by the memorial. "Thinking about the 42? She asked quietly. "Always," Garrett admitted, wondering if they'd think this was worth it, if the peace we're building justifies the war they died fighting. "I don't know if anything justifies war," Kara said. "But maybe this honors them, shows that their sacrifice led somewhere other than more violence." Garrett nodded slowly. "Your father would be proud of you. This treaty, what you've built." "We've built," Kara corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you. You saved a child, I just saved you. You're the one who changed an empire." "No," Kara turned to face him. "We both made impossible choices that shouldn't have worked. And because they did, two civilizations are talking instead of killing. That's not one person's achievement. That's what happens when people choose mercy, when the universe demands cruelty." In the distance, the treaty celebration was beginning. Human and Sarix dignitaries mingling awkwardly, trying to figure out the protocols of interspecies diplomacy. Music played, food was shared. Children from both civilizations drew pictures together under the watchful eyes of parents who were learning to see enemies as neighbors. "What happens now?" Garrett asked. "The treaty's signed. The war's over. What do we do?" Kara smiled. "We keep choosing the impossible option. We keep proving that trust isn't suicide and mercy isn't weakness. We keep being unpredictable in ways that create growth instead of destruction. For how long? As long as it takes, maybe forever. Maybe that's what it means to be alive, choosing every day to be better than our worst impulses. Garrett looked at the memorial, at the carved figures holding hands across species boundaries. No pressure, right? None at all, Kyra agreed. They stood together in silence, watching the celebration, watching two civilizations tentatively building something neither had thought possible 6 months ago. And somewhere beyond the edge of human and Sarek space, in the places where ancient intelligences watched and learned, the fragments of the continuum observed, no longer maintaining equilibrium, just observing, learning, accepting uncertainty as the price of growth. One of those fragments, monitoring the Nevada treaty site, recorded something in its analytical logs. Observation. Colonel Garrett Dalton and Princess Kara continue to make choices with unpredictable outcomes. Assessment. This remains terrifying. Conclusion. Terror may be an appropriate response to witnessing evolution. Recommendation. Continue observation, suspend judgment, acknowledge uncertainty. Note, hope detected in celebration patterns. Emotion classified as irrational but apparently motivating positive behavioral changes. Further study required. And in the Nevada desert, under alien skies that had witnessed 2 years of war and 6 months of painful peace, Garrett and Kyra stood together. Symbols, yes, but also just two people who'd made a choice in the sand and refused to let the universe tell them it was wrong. The war was over. The peace had begun. And the galaxy, whether it liked it or not, was learning to live with species who refused to be predictable. Empress Kyra returned to Sarek's Prime 2 weeks after the treaty signing. The coronation was scheduled for the following month, a massive ceremony involving representatives from 40 worlds, including human delegates who were still figuring out Sarek's diplomatic protocols. But before the ceremony, before the formal assumption of power, Kyra had one piece of personal business to attend to. She stood in her private quarters, looking at a holographic display showing two images side by side. On the left, her father, King Terran, young and vibrant, holding a newborn Kyra in his arms. On the right, Garrett Dalton kneeling in the Nevada desert, covered in blood and ash, whispering, "Please don't die," to an enemy princess. Two men, 2 centuries apart, who'd chosen mercy when logic demanded cruelty. One had died for it, one had somehow survived. "You would have liked him," Kara said to her father's image. "He's stubborn, impulsive, completely ignores tactical considerations when someone's dying in front of him. Exactly the kind of person you tried to teach me to be before." She didn't finish. Didn't need to. A knock at the door. "Come," Kara called. Valora entered, wearing simple robes instead of imperial regalia. She'd adapted to retirement quickly, seemed almost relieved to be free of the crown's weight. "I thought I'd find you here," Valora said quietly, "talking to your father before the coronation. He should be here, should see what we're building. He is here, in every choice you make that values conscience over calculation." Valora moved to stand beside her daughter. "I spent 2 centuries trying to make you different from him, trying to teach you that his mercy got him killed. That trust was weakness. You were trying to protect me. I was trying to protect myself from feeling that loss again," Valora corrected. "And in doing so, I nearly lost you anyway. Not to assassins, but to the doctrine I built to replace your father's compassion." She touched the holographic display, and Garrett's image enlarged slightly. "This human who I should have executed, who violated every tactical principle I'd established, saved you by doing exactly what your father would have done. And in saving you, he saved me from becoming the very thing I'd been trying to prevent." What thing? Someone who survived but lost everything worth surviving for. Valora looked at her daughter. "I'm proud of you, Kara. Proud of the choice you made in that desert. Proud of the treaty you negotiated. Proud of the empress you're becoming. Your father would be too." Kara felt tears forming, something she'd been trained since childhood not to show. But Valora had cried in her private logs after almost losing Kyra. Maybe it was time to admit that grief and love and fear were strengths, not weaknesses. "I'm terrified," Kyra admitted. "The Empire is fractured. Half still think I'm compromised by human sentiment. The other half expect me to lead us into a new era I don't know how to build. I'm 20 years old, Mother. How am I supposed to? The same way you saved Brennan Cole, Valora interrupted gently. You saw what needed to be done and you did it. Consequences be damned. That's not recklessness. That's courage. And courage is exactly what the Sarix Empire needs right now. She pulled up another holographic display, this one showing approval ratings across Sarix worlds. You're more popular than I ever was, you know. 63% approval rating. Young officers idolize you. Civilian populations see you as the future. Even some of Vorn's faction have come around. And the rest will either adapt or be left behind. Valora smiled. Evolution isn't comfortable, but it's necessary. You taught me that. Kyra looked at her mother, the Iron Widow who'd ruled for 2 centuries with perfect certainty, now admitting she'd been wrong about the most fundamental principles of her reign. Thank you, Kyra said quietly, for letting me make my own mistakes. For trusting my choice even when it violated everything you believed. Thank you for proving that my beliefs needed violating, Valora replied. Now come, we have a coronation to prepare for, and I believe Colonel Dalton is scheduled to arrive tomorrow as part of the human diplomatic delegation. Kyra felt something flutter in her chest, not romantic exactly, but the warm recognition of friendship forged in impossible circumstances. He is, along with General Hayes and Brennan's family. Apparently the president wants maximum symbolic impact. Politicians, Valora said with gentle amusement, always thinking about optics, though I suppose in this case the symbols matter. 2 people who made impossible choices standing together at the coronation of an empress who's building something unprecedented. No pressure, Kyra murmured. None at all, Valora agreed. The coronation of Empress Kyra took place under Sarix Prime's 3 moons, in an amphitheater that had hosted such ceremonies for 5,000 years. Representatives from 40 worlds filled the seats, an unprecedented gathering that would have been impossible a year ago. Human and Sarix sat side by side, still awkward but trying. Coalition species observed from special sections, curious about what would emerge from this alliance between chaotic humanity and evolving Sarix. Garrett stood in the human delegation section, wearing his dress uniform and feeling completely out of place. Beside him, General Hayes radiated professional composure despite being on an alien world surrounded by species that had been enemies 6 months ago. You nervous? Hayes asked quietly. Terrified, Garrett admitted. I'm a medic from Montana. I shouldn't be at the coronation of an alien empress. And yet here you are. The man who started all this by refusing to let one more person die. Hayes smiled slightly. Own it, Colonel. You earned this seat. The ceremony began with traditional Sarix rituals, harmonic chanting, crystalline instruments that produced sounds Garrett's ears weren't quite designed to process, formal recitations of lineage dating back millennia. Then Kyra entered. She wore regalia that combined traditional Sarix elements with something new, patterns that referenced both her father's compassion and her mother's strength, colors that somehow bridged the gap between warrior and peacemaker. As she walked toward the throne, she passed the section where Garrett sat. Their eyes met for just a moment. Thank you, she mouthed silently. Garrett nodded, no words needed. The crown, not Valora's old crown, but a new one crafted specifically for Kyra, was brought forward by General Korvax. The old warrior had aged visibly in the last year, but his eyes held something Garrett had learned to recognize, hope mixed with determination. As Korvax placed the crown on Kyra's head, he spoke the traditional oath. Do you swear to protect the Sarix dominion from all enemies, foreign and domestic? Kyra's response wasn't traditional. I swear to protect the Sarix dominion by seeing enemies as potential allies, by choosing growth over stagnation, and by never forgetting that mercy can be the strongest form of strength. Murmurs rippled through the amphitheater. This wasn't protocol, this was revolution. Do you swear to maintain the doctrine of eternal vigilance? Korvax continued. I swear to maintain eternal wisdom, Kyra replied, which includes the wisdom to recognize when doctrine needs to evolve. I will be vigilant against threats, but I will also be vigilant against becoming so certain of our righteousness that we stop questioning ourselves. More murmurs, some approving, some uncertain. Korvax smiled slightly. He'd clearly expected this. Do you swear to honor the memory of those who built the Sarix Empire? I swear to honor them by building something worthy of their sacrifice, by proving that their legacy is strong enough to adapt, to grow, to become something they might not recognize, but would be proud of. Korvac stepped back. Then by the authority granted to me as High Commander of the Sarix military, and with the blessing of Empress Valora, who ruled before you, I declare you Empress Kyra, sovereign of the Sarix Dominion and all its territories. The amphitheater erupted, not in the perfect unified approval that Valora's coronation had received, but in a messy, chaotic mix of cheering, hesitant applause, and a few protests that were quickly drowned out. It was imperfect. It was uncertain. It was alive. After the formal ceremony, there was a reception, another unprecedented event where species that had been enemies were expected to make small talk over food and drink. Garrett found himself cornered by a Sarix officer who wanted to ask about human military tactics, a coalition diplomat who was fascinated by the human capacity for irrational decision-making, and most surprisingly, Brennan Cole, who'd somehow escaped his mother's supervision to find the space soldier who saved the princess. "Colonel Dalton," Brennan said, weaving through adult legs with the confidence of an 8-year-old who'd become accidentally famous. Garrett knelt to his level. "Hey, Brennan, enjoying the party?" "It's boring. Too many people talking about politics." Brennan pulled something from his pocket, another crayon drawing, this one showing Garrett and Kyra standing together with Earth and Sarix Prime in the background. "I made you this. Mom said you probably don't have art in space." Garrett took the drawing carefully, felt his throat tighten. "Thank you. This is really good. I put you and the princess together because you're friends now, right? That's what Mom said, that you became friends even though you were supposed to be enemies." "Yeah," Garrett said quietly. "That's exactly what happened, Ned." "Cool." Brennan grinned. "Mom says when I grow up, maybe I can be a diplomat and make friends with aliens too." "I think you'd be great at that." After Brennan ran off to find more interesting adults to bother, Garrett stood holding the drawing and trying to process the strange turns his life had taken. A year ago, he'd been a combat medic trying to survive a war. Now he was at the coronation of an alien empress, holding a crayon drawing from a child who'd accidentally become the symbol of peace between species. "He's right, you know." Garrett turned to find Kyra, Empress Kyra now, standing behind him. She'd removed the formal crown for the reception, but still wore the regalia. "About what?" Garrett asked. "About us being friends." Kyra smiled. "I know the official diplomatic language is strategic alliance and cooperative relationship, but Brennan has it right. We're friends. Friends who happened to start a revolution. Friends who made impossible choices that somehow worked," Garrett corrected. "Same thing." Kyra looked around the reception, at humans and Sarix tentatively interacting, at coalition species watching with curiosity instead of fear. A year ago, this would have been unthinkable. Now it's just happening. Because you refuse to let me die, and I refuse to let Brennan die. And because your mother chose to question 2 centuries of certainty, Garrett added. And because General Hayes chose transparency over retaliation. And because the continuum chose to evolve instead of exterminate, a lot of people made impossible choices. True, but it started with us. Kyra paused. The Sarix have a saying, the avalanche begins with a single stone. You and I were stones. What we started is still rolling. Is that a good thing or a terrifying thing? Both, always both. Kyra looked at the drawing Brennan had made. But I'd rather be terrified and alive than certain and stagnant. Your species taught me that. We didn't teach you anything. You already knew it. You just needed permission to admit it. Before Kyra could respond, Valora appeared, bringing with her a tall Sarix officer Garrett didn't recognize. Colonel Dalton, Valora said formally, may I introduce High Commander Thessa. She'll be coordinating the joint military exercises we've planned for next quarter. Garrett blinked. Joint military exercises? Disaster response protocols, Thessa explained, her voice carrying the crisp precision of a career officer. The treaty includes provisions for cooperative emergency response. We're planning scenarios where human and Sarix units train together to handle crisis situations. Which means, Valora added with a slight smile, your expertise as a medic will be valuable if you're willing to serve as a liaison officer. Garrett looked at Kyra, who nodded encouragingly. Then at Hayes, who was watching from across the room with an expression that said, "I already approve this. Don't embarrass me." "I'd be honored," Garrett said. After the official introductions, after the diplomatic niceties, after Valora had drifted away to speak with the coalition representatives, Kyra and Garrett found themselves alone on a balcony overlooking Sarix Prime's capital city. The architecture was beautiful in that distinctly alien way. Crystalline structures that caught the light of three moons, creating patterns Garrett's human eyes couldn't quite process but found mesmerizing anyway. "Do you ever wonder if we made the right choice?" Kara asked quietly. "If saving each other was worth everything that followed?" "Every day," Garrett admitted. "I wonder if the 42 soldiers I lost would think this peace justifies the war they died fighting. If Brennan will grow up grateful I saved you or resentful of what happened after. And I don't know, maybe I never will. But I know this. When I knelt in that desert and saw you dying, I had a choice. Let you die and preserve tactical advantage, or save you and accept the consequences. I chose to save you because I'd already lost 42 people and couldn't stand to lose one more." He paused. "If that choice led to peace, great. If it leads to new conflicts, I'll deal with those too. But at least I chose life over efficiency, chose being human over being a perfect soldier." Kara was quiet for a moment. "My father used to say that the measure of a civilization isn't how efficiently it kills its enemies, but how creatively it finds alternatives to killing. You gave me that alternative, Garrett. You showed me that enemies can become friends if someone's brave enough to take the first step." "You took the first step," Garrett corrected. "You saved Brennan when you had every reason to let him die. I just returned the favor." "Then we're both impossibly brave or impossibly foolish." "Probably both." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the alien city shimmer under three moons. Somewhere below, humans and Sarix were learning to share spaces, to communicate across species barriers, to build something neither civilization had imagined possible a year ago. It was messy, uncertain, absolutely terrifying. It was also, Garrett realized, the most important thing he'd ever been part of. "What happens now?" he asked. "Treaties signed, your Empress, the galaxy's adjusting to the fact that humans and Sarix aren't killing each other anymore. Where do we go from here?" Kara smiled. That expression Garrett had learned meant she was about to say something profound, disguised as something simple. "We keep going, keep making impossible choices. Keep proving that chaos is just another word for being alive." She looked at him. "And we do it together. Because apparently that's how this works. Humans and Sarix choosing growth over certainty, one impossible decision at a time." "No pressure," Garrett murmured. "None at all," Kara agreed. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, the fragments of the continuum continued their observation, learning what it meant to witness evolution without trying to control it. Learning that uncertainty wasn't a threat to be eliminated, but a condition to be accepted. Learning that being alive meant making choices that couldn't be optimized, predicted, or reduced to simple formulas. Learning slowly and painfully and beautifully what organic beings had known all along. That the most terrifying thing in the universe wasn't chaos. It was the possibility that chaos might lead somewhere better than perfect order ever could. And that possibility, more than any weapon or strategy or doctrine, was worth every impossible choice it took to get there.